In 1987, the Single European Act made protecting health, natural resources and the environment an EU goal. Next came the European Environment Agency in 1990. It informs people about and helps monitor environmental action in the EU. Environmental issues became a fully integrated EU policy area with the Maastricht Treaty in 1993. It also strengthened the European Parliament's role in developing environment policy. But this was not enough to tackle climate change.
But the problem of global climate change is one that affects us all. The environmental challenge, which confronts the whole world, demands an equivalent response from the whole world.
We all know that human activities are changing the atmosphere in unexpected and in unprecedented ways.
By the late 1980s, there was pretty much a consensus throughout the political world that man-made climate change was a thing to be concerned about, and that the release of CO2 emissions in particular required management.
If you add these infrared-absorbing gases to a planet, then what happens is the sunlight comes in as before, but when the surface tries to radiate to space in the infrared, it is blocked, it is impeded by the absorbing gases. And so the surface temperature has to rise so that there is an equilibrium between what comes in and what goes out. So this is the greenhouse effect. It is a misnomer for more reasons than one. It's a misnomer in particular because that's not how the florist greenhouse works, but that's a very minor point.
Even free market evangelists like Margaret Thatcher were on board with mainstream scientific opinion, and everyone imagined emissions would be curtailed in much the same way that ozone-depleting CFCs were.
And that possibility has increased, it seems, partly as a result of the Prime Minister's summertime reading, which included an alarming US congressional report on the heating up of the world's climate. That report was among several influences which led Mrs. Thatcher, previously not renowned for environmental concern, to make her recent speech to the Royal Society on the need to protect the balance of nature. And that speech has dramatically forced political attention on what science has long referred to as the greenhouse effect.
Because it is the biggest single threat to sustainable development.
But if we are to change our ways in manners that may well be required in order to not be in jeopardy, doesn't human history and human nature suggest that there's going to have to be some element of compulsion and regulation as to the way we live?
There's also the voluntary approach. Naturally, one's got to back it up with regulation and compulsion if that is necessary.
But the oil industry had other ideas.
You can see it in their eyes. They're pushing to raise the benchmark of quality. And after 3 million miles of testing, the people of Exxon know Exxon Supreme Gasoline offers the highest level of engine cleaning, all for one reason.
One of America's most magnificent waterways is blackened and befouled tonight by the biggest oil spill in American history.
Now, researchers have claimed that the oil giant ExxonMobil accurately forecast how burning fossil fuels would cause the planet to warm, going as far back as the 1970s. Now, that's based on a new study by scientists at Harvard University and the Potsdam Institute of Climate Change. They say Exxon's own experts produced models on warming that were even more accurate than NASA's projections. The report's authors say Exxon made public statements that contradicted its own scientific data, including the claim that climate action wasn't an urgent problem. Now, here's a chart from the report. The researchers say
companies like Exxon had been aware of the deleterious effects of emissions from their petrochemical products on the climate in medium to long-term predictions produced by their own scientific research teams for at least 50 years or more.
I think that the challenge to us today is very much to realise exactly the extent of what's going on. And that little programme demonstrated a whole catalogue of things, each one of which could be dealt with on its own. But when you put them all together, it makes the most extraordinary...
But when news of this unwanted association with all things oil blew up in the latter part of the 1980s...
Okay, can you expand on that?
Sure. The last time there was this much CO2 in the air, the oceans were 80 feet higher than they are now. Two things you should know. Half the world's population lives within 120 miles of an ocean.
And the other?
Humans can't breathe underwater.
You're saying the situation's dire.
Not exactly.
Industry leaders' concerns over unwanted regulation grew, and their answer was to take a tip from big tobacco.
Yes, according to this repeated nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette.
Former president of a major tobacco firm and chairman of the Industry Research Committee. Mr. Morrow, I would like to quote from a statement released at the time the Tobacco Industry Research Committee was formed. At that time, we stated, "We accept an interest in people's health as a basic responsibility paramount to every other consideration in our business." And that's where we stand today.
Who had successfully stalled serious restrictions for far longer than was reasonable in their own benign carcinogenic ambition to make as much profit as possible at the expense of the lives of their customers.
I don't want the job if it means attacking the tobacco industry.
But it wouldn't. You see, Leslie, we in government have to be realists. I want you to work with the tobacco industry. I mean, they're really trying to sort out the problems. They've got huge resources, nice chaps, caring people and really fabulous employers. They are really trying to help. I want you to work with the industry, not against it. All right?
We were generating what we thought was state-of-the-art information. We were doing science that we didn't think in any way, shape, or form would be questioned.
Many scientists agree there's ample time to better understand climate systems and consider policy options. So there's simply no reason to take drastic action now.
And there was no questioning that the atmospheric carbon dioxide was increasing, that atmospheric carbon dioxide was going to change the climate in some fashion. The question was how fast, how much, and what kind of impacts would it have, overall to the planet.
But scientific evidence remains inconclusive as to whether human activities affect the global climate.
In order to combat the mounting evidence that their product was kind of awful and that they knew this all along, they employed such stalwart deniers of science as E. Bruce Harrison, an extreme right-wing dick who viewed any environmental restrictions as a celebration of Lenin and the installation of a Pol Pot-style regime taking over the United States.
So environment, energy, climate change have now pushed us to the point where we need to get involved in the politics of all of this. And it is in that place that we now get back to the ethical, moral, social accountability and performance.
How to get ahead in advertising.
My name's Barbara Simmons, and I'm a biochemist. But at night, I'm a woman.
Rule number 1.
As a member of that much maligned, mostly with justification group of people working in corporate public relations, he had some help.
Beaker, better give that device a good going over. Oh, silly me. I forgot to plug it in. And Eureka! Oh, perfect, Beaker! You've done it! Oh, now, Beaky, I don't have a candle, but I do have this uranium fuel rod. But Beaker, it only goes in your head.
Mainly from climate scientists themselves, who were very bad at this media messaging kind of thing. Scientists, generally, are shy, retiring types. with the odd exception.
Thousands of hacked emails showing global warming scientists blasting researchers who do not buy into their doomsday scenarios. One of the scientists threatening to, and I quote now, beat the crap out of my next guest. Pat Michaels from the Cato Institute joins me now. Pat, welcome to the program.
If your elitist East Coast evolution is real, why has no one found the missing link between modern humans and ancient apes?
We did find it. It's called Homo erectus.
Then you have proven my case, sir. For no one has found the link between apes and this Homo erectus.
Yes, they have. It's called Homo habilis.
Aha! But no.
And they tend to deal in peer-reviewed, evidence-based submissions.
Hey, I am very passionate about the planet.
Say global warming is a myth.
It's a myth. Further study is needed.
And don't have media training.
Stage 2, you go on to discredit the evidence that you're not publishing.
Well, how, if you're not publishing it?
Oh, really, Minister? It's much easier if it's not published, obviously. You do it by press leaks, of course, not directly. You say it leaves some important questions unanswered, that much of the evidence is inconclusive.
Now, I think that the climate change science is far from settled.
That the figures are open to other...
PR wankers, on the other hand, are usually very good with one-line bollocks that depressingly seem to reach the simple-minded.
Exactly. He could make a grossly inflammatory speech. You could sack him and emerge as a man of principle. Yet the impression would still get about that we are tougher on immigration than the socialists.
And they don't get much simpler-minded and Magoon-like than some of the right-wing politicians who resented any suggestion that human beings might have created a problem out of the capitalist intention to make as much money as possible.
There's about 1.4 million people every year who die because of indoor air pollution. Why? Because they don't have electricity. They burn biomass and dung in their homes for heating and for cooking. These people are dying because they're dirt poor, and anything we do to increase fossil fuel energy prices is going to make it very difficult for them to ever climb out of poverty. As Larry Summers once said...
Again, I didn't interrupt you.
Sure.
The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is not only the 2,000 world leading scientists, but every single member government, which is 170 governments, including the United States and China and Saudi Arabia, sign off on the reports that come out from the IPCC
So it's a political process.
Word for word. That's why it's a least common denominator.
It's not
and
a science
underestimates
process.
what's going to happen. No, it's
You're
a science.
touting politics as though that's scientific proof. That's kind of embarrassing.
It is a
isn't it?
scientific process which gets watered down
Right,
and
which-
underestimates what the science actually says.
It's no more a scientific process than a Republican or Democrat Party platform convention is. Each line is approved by member governments. It's called the Intergovernmental Panel. I don't know where you missed that. And as for your allegation of misrepresenting the scientist, I did a public rebuttal to you. I actually responded directly to the scientist. We actually put her words up to the percent of that she said maybe linked to the sun. So your whole thing is completely without any credibility.
My job as a consultant is to listen real hard to what the problem is and what the company is facing, and then try to interpret it in terms of what I know about what folks out here in government and the community are expecting and requiring, and try to then to come up with some initiatives.
Harrison, of course, was not scientifically trained, and this aided him greatly in spouting total crap about the evidence.
How did global warming become a subject of discussion? Was this Al Gore? Was it people pushing in the run-up to Kyoto? How did it become an issue?
Well, it actually came from a great deal of concern about how industrial activity may have been changing the climate from the 1970s. You may recall that the 1970s was actually a very cold period, and for a brief period of time there were a lot of stories about global cooling. I remember that in high school, where there was talk about the overdue ice age and whatnot, and how we've seen cooling temperatures since World War II, and that didn't quite pan out, but it did create a little bit of a flurry. But that touched off research about industrial activity and how it might affect the climate. And
I completely understand why conservatives are skeptical about climate change as a significant problem, because so was I. I used to do whatever I could to convince people that climate change wasn't a threat. It was my job at a libertarian think tank, and I was good at it. Then one day, a climate expert challenged me and told me to read the actual science for myself, so I did. And what I found was that all the science confirmed that our planet was warming dangerously fast, and carbon emissions from oil, coal, and gas were the cause. So I went to see my colleague, and he admitted to me that our information was skewed to make our point seem stronger. In other words, it was a lie. The facts just don't.
We went into the green room to get our microphones off and get the makeup taken off and that sort of thing. And Rome said, did you even read Hansen's testimony just mangled on the air just now? And Rome explained to me why that narrative was completely off. And he said, this is why I hate debating people like you on the air, because you're disingenuous, or if you're not consciously disingenuous, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And I don't have the luxury of time to, walk an audience through what idiocy you're repeating. So if you want to be a hack all your life, then keep doing this. But I'm never going to debate you again because I didn't find any of that useful. But if you don't want to be a hack, go back to your office and tell me I'm wrong.
The Supreme Court decision came down on Brown versus School Board, declaring that segregated schools were not constitutional, therefore not legal, therefore to be banned. Well, in Alabama, where I was from, and working later for an Alabama congressman, that just was not acceptable. And yet, I knew it was the right thing to do. And so I conferred with a guy who was also from a small cotton mill town in Alabama and talked. He said, it is the right thing. I said, okay, let's do something. I'm going to write an editorial here saying that we believe that time is right now to end segregation in Alabama. And Jimmy, my friend, said, you're going to get in big trouble.
Born in Alabama, his career began as a reporter on a local newspaper, and he then went on to be a press secretary for some Alabama Democratic senator whose name I can't find. Following this, he decided to create his own imaginatively titled E. Bruce Harrison Company in 1973.
And you believe you're a natural woman, don't you? How to know how natural is?
All of them will help build the city of tomorrow. Lacking 1,000 years' experience, we do not know what form this city will take. For who can foretell a future dominated by the inquisitive spirit of man? Yet, like every city man ever built, it will be a city of nature shaped by man. A city of wood and stone and steel and concrete. But in addition, it will be a city transformed by man and his chemistry, and by the new materials that flow from the plants with the tall towers and the colorful pipes. A city built from the world that nature forgot.
His first foray in scientific disinformation began when he was hired to protect the rights of those poor big chemical industries who just wanted to go on pushing the indiscriminate use of dangerous pesticides, no matter how many people they killed.
We did ask Monsanto for comment, and this is what they told us. It's important to bring this side of the story. They said more than 800 scientific studies, the U.S. EPA, the National Institutes of Health, and regulators around the world have concluded that glyphosate is safe for use and does not cause cancer. We have empathy for anyone suffering from cancer, but
in the 90s, he engaged in the egregious attack on any environmental lobby with the pithy, if moronic slogan, the 3 E's: environment, energy, and economy, employing the 3 Ds. Disingenuous.
Ms. Watkins, do you agree climate change is a threat to our existence?
Chairwoman, I agree that climate change is one of the biggest challenges that we have in the world today, which is why at Shell we're in action on providing lower and no carbon products to our customers.
Disinformation.
Lawmakers also dug into a video of a former ExxonMobil lobbyist who said the company aggressively fought back against the science.
Did we join some of these shadow groups to work against some of the early efforts. Yes, that's true.
And defamation.
Major victory for a prominent climate scientist, Michael Mann. He won his long-fought legal battle against two conservative writers. In 2012, the man falsely claimed that Mann had manipulated data in his research that showed a dramatically warming planet, and they compared him to convicted child molester Jerry Sandusky, saying that instead of molesting children, Mann was molesting data.
Spreading about like so much ammonia methane-ridden manure, he assisted with documentaries like the Channel 4 Equinox series, The Great Green Conspiracy.
For proponents of the greenhouse effect, it heralds something akin to an apocalypse. An Earth parched and scorched by the sun. A climate in chaos. Nor is it a theory supported by a few cranks. It's been endorsed by the great and the good, by politicians and academics. There's only one problem. There's mounting evidence that it's not true.
And other such dodgerel. And by the end of the decade had effectively turned the conversation around cuts in emissions into an entirely divisive concept.
Gee, Lisa, looks like tomorrow I'll be shoveling 10 feet of global warming.
Global warming can cause weather at both extremes, hot and cold.
I see, so you're saying warming makes it colder. Well, aren't you the queen of crazy land? Everything's the opposite of everything. La-di-da-di-da. I'm Lisa Simpson. La-di-da-di-da.
Really? Really? Uh-huh. All right.
You are either a wet, liberal-bellied, life-loving, communist, woke person who strangely wants to preserve life on Earth at the expense of the common-sense use of non-renewable, expensive, socially and economically divisive and environmentally destructive, highly subsidised petrochemicals, coal and gas.
Vegetable rights and peace.
Or you were the very pinnacle of sensible, we don't give a fuck about the future, it's all a lie, and even if it isn't, we're patriotic twats that won't be around when the end times come from our ludicrous denial of the evidence viewer of Fox News. You're never going to guess which side of the argument I come down on.
There's always some questions unanswered.
Such as?
Well, the ones that weren't asked.
Now, there were some legitimate questions about the science in the relatively embryonic models back in the 1990s used to forecast the climate, and some anomalies, which have since been explained in the data. A very small number of scientists from various disciplines came to question the assertions of the majority, and the main questions were, A, were the changes in the climate being observed a long-term trend, given the data was only available from different sources since the late 19th century?
A number of weather stations are in towns. There are a number of ways that one can account for that problem. The obvious way is just to eliminate those stations from the data set that you use to calculate the large area average temperature values.
Some tide gauge stations show the sea level rising over long periods of time. Others show sea level falling during other periods of time. The problem is that the land is also moving up and down. In some places it moves up considerably fast, in other places it falls, it subsides fairly fast. So you're measuring the sea level against another level that's moving up and down. And that leaves you with a lot of uncertainty about how much the ocean is moving versus how much land is.
And B, would such small concentrations in trace gases in the troposphere really affect the energy balance and therefore the climate significantly?
Am I correct? Trace gases are gases that account for no more than 1% of all the gases in the atmosphere, at least the seven miles up.
Yes, in fact, most of the time, much, much, much less than that.
There are many complicated aspects to this conversation, but the thing is, physics and chemistry, ever since the late 1800s, it was understood there were different kinds of radiation. To put simply, short wave, such as light, and long wave, such as vibrational infrared, or heat, as we commonly call it.
We are certain that this being can see in only one spectrum of light, infrared.
And it was realised and tested that one was invisible to trace gases, and the other tended to act on and get stuck in molecules of things like CO2, CH4, H2O, and so on.
That the Earth is a lot warmer in the past. The Earth was a lot colder in the past.
And the problem is that everything here is true.
The other point, which has often been misused by people trying to deny climate change, is that studying huge shifts in temperature, as was apparent when looking at ice cores, anecdotal descriptions and so forth,
for London, it was the coldest January since records were first kept in 1841.
It's become clear that global changes correlated more often than not with huge volcanic events, and following short-term cooling effects from aerosols produced increasing amounts of trace gas emissions. An obvious example is the Permian global temperatures that were 8 times higher than the 1900s, and the Deccan traps in the late Cretaceous period, when the certain high thigh-boned inhabitants decided to go on a permanent vacation in the fossil record.
The end of the dinosaurs now seems much more complicated than it once did. It appears they were already dwindling under pressure from a worsening environment. Massive volcanism and falling sea levels might have forced them to extinction, even if the asteroid had missed.
So there really wasn't any credible arguments that the established science reading of the evidence was basically flawed.
The simple reality that climate change was a human-caused problem, driven primarily by fossil fuel consumption, meant that anyone with a brain could see the writing on the wall for the fossil fuel industry. What followed was a change in tactics.
The year 2085. The atmospheric level of carbon dioxide has doubled to 540 parts per million. What kind of world have we created?
A better world, a more productive world. Plants are the basis for all productivity on Earth. They're the only organisms that can utilize the sun's energy and create matter, food. And they're going to do that much more effectively, much more efficiently.
With a doubling of CO2, cotton growers can look forward to yields that are 60% and more greater than what they are at present-day levels.
For citrus, it would be a very, very positive thing.
Our world will be a much better one.
Some of the very worst are packed into big sheds. 7,000 now, most apparently dying of malnutrition, pneumonia, and the diseases that prey on the starving.
Then at 4 o'clock, the wind changed, taking the fronts of the fires to even greater distances, and the smoke flooded everywhere.
It was also not unreasonable to point out that energy transition was likely to disrupt the status quo.
It is clear that the environmental crisis which is confronting the world will profoundly alter the future destiny of our planet,
cause some considerable problems in oil-producing countries' economies, and required careful strategic planning.
Even the pessimists, the ones that predict these terrible cases, aren't really predicting large effects for 50 years or so. So I don't see that we should pour money on this problem in the short run. We should have an intelligent program, but I don't see the reason for haste.
Which was possible at that time, but now we have to do everything extremely quickly, and we will still be dealing with the consequences of incomprehensible irresponsibility of oil companies and vested interests in throwing human beings and life on Earth literally under the diesel-powered bus.
Example of that is in the trucking industry, where some years ago government started to require the kinds of reduction in tailpipe emissions that just could not be achieved unless everybody got together and decided they had to change the fuel that's going into those vehicles. Now I'm talking about diesel. And so we put around the table some folks who had a stake in a good outcome there and ended up having a good outcome, actually taking it all the way to the Supreme Court to get the ruling on what sort of sulfur content there was in diesel fuel changed. So that's the kind of thing, working with others.
The pernicious aspect of the E. Bruce argument was that really this was protecting the few at the expense of, well, everyone, and ultimately including the few, when in truth physics doesn't really give a toss who you vote for. Science! And we're all subject to, don't say this too loud,
There is nothing There is nothing quite as beautiful as cash.
Even big business and right-wing knobwits.
Mahawk. Now then, gentlemen.
From the considerable financial and detrimental effects of fires, droughts, floods and hurricanes, and eventually dying from heat exhaustion.
Last month, right here in this place, I announced that the first 6 months of the year, January through June, each set new records for high global temperatures. That means in the 118 years since we began keeping modern, reliable records.
Not pushing, it's just trying to find out how you collaborate toward a reasonable win-win outcome.
And you believe you're a natural